Good morning. Thank you for joining me in this morning mindfulness practice. I'm going to talk about imagination and imagining what you want from the end, from already having happened, from taking place, from feeling what you would feel when what you truly desire is already your reality. Dr. Franz Hartmann said the first power that meets us at the threshold of the soul's domain is the power of imagination. And reading from the book Sealed Instructions, or the chapter Sealed Instructions from Neville Goddard, The Power of Awareness and Awakened Imagination. I studied this book with my mentor, Bob Proctor, many years ago, and it's quite deep, but when you hear it a few times, it makes sense. Bob Proctor talked about Neville Goddard as one of the most powerful writers ever. And in Sealed Instructions, Neville Goddard says, I was first made conscious of the power, nature, and redemptive function of imagination through the teachings of my friend Abdullah. What a comfort it is to know that all that I experience is a result of my own standard of beliefs, that I am the center of my own web of circumstances, and that as I change, so must my outer world. And that's what I learned from Bob Proctor, is that the outside world never changes. It's your perception, your belief, the way you create through your imagination that your outside world changes. Your thinking is so powerful. You can think things into form. You can think a thought, and when you add emotion to it, it becomes reality. That's how everything that ever was started, in your imagination, in a person's thinking patterns, in deciding, in choosing, in imagining, and then taking action and going out and making things happen, or allowing things to happen, allowing things to unfold. Neville Goddard says the world presents different appearances according as our states of consciousness differ. What we see when we are identified with a state cannot be seen when we are no longer fused with it. By state is meant all that mankind believes and consents to as true. No idea presented to the mind can realize itself unless the mind accepts it. It depends on the acceptance, the state with which we are identified, how things present themselves. In the fusion of imagination and states is to be found the shaping of the world as it seems. The world is a revelation of the states with which imagination is fused. It is the state from which we think that determines the objective world in which we live. The rich man, the poor man, the good man, the thief are what they are by virtue of the states from which they view the world. On the distinction between these states depends the distinction between the worlds of these men. Individually, so different is this same world. It is not the actions and behavior of the good man that should be matched, but his point of view. Outer reforms are useless if the inner state is not changed. Success is gained not by imitating the outer actions of the successful, but by right inner actions and inner talking. If we detach ourselves from a state, and we may at any moment, the conditions and circumstances to which that union gave being vanish. What he means is if you stop looking at what you don't want as being your the world as it is, and you start looking at what you want it to be, you start fusing your imagination with prosperity instead of poverty. You start to notice abundance. You start to realize that everything is available to you. You just have to focus your attention on it. You fuse with the state of being, and that's what your world becomes. If you continue to look at lack and limitation, your imagination notices debt, it notices poverty, it notices what's not going well in your life. You want to fuse with what you prefer. You want to decide what it is that I really want. What would that feel like? What would it look like? Start to prepare your imagination, allow your body to relax and to create in your mind what you prefer. And as you get into that state of being, as you fuse with what it would be like to be prosperous, what it would be like to be abundantly blessed, what it would feel like, then you start to get ideas. You start to take different actions. You start to become the person that has that idea, but it starts in your imagination. Neville Goddard talks about uh, this story Bob Proctor used to tell, and this is how things change. Neville says, "It was in the fall of 1933 in New York City that I approached Abdullah with a problem. He asked me one simple question: 'What do you want?' I told him that I would like to spend the winter in Barbados, but that I was broke. I literally did not have a nickel. He said, 'If you will imagine yourself to be in Barbados, thinking and viewing the world from that state of consciousness instead of thinking of Barbados, you will spend the winter there. You must not concern yourself with the ways and means of getting there, for the state of consciousness of already being in Barbados, if occupied by your imagination, will devise the means best suited to realize itself. Man lives by committing himself to invisible states, by fusing his imagination with what he knows to be other than himself. And in this union, he experiences the result of that fusion. No one can lose what he has save by detachment from the state where the things experienced have their natural life. You must imagine yourself right into the state of your fulfilled desire,' Abdullah told me, 'and fall asleep viewing the world from Barbados. The world which we describe from observation must be as we describe it relative to ourselves. Our imagination connects us with the state desired, but we must use imagination masterfully, not as the onlooker thinking of the end, but as a partaker thinking from the end. We must actually be there in imagination. If we do this, our subjective experience will be realized objectively. He said, this is not mere fantasy, not mere fancy, but a truth you can prove by experience. Abdullah's appeal to enter into the wish fulfilled was the secret of thinking from the end. Every state is already there as mere possibility as long as you think of it. But it is overpoweringly real when you think from it. I began right there and then, fixing my thoughts beyond the limits of sense, beyond that aspect to which my present state gave being, towards a feeling of already being in Barbados and viewing the world from that standpoint. He emphasized the importance of the state from which man views the world as he falls asleep. All prophets claim that the voice of God is chiefly heard by man in dreams. Job 33:15-16 says, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men, in slumberings upon the bed, then he openeth the ears of men and sealeth their instructions. That night and for several nights thereafter, I fell asleep in the assumption that I was in my father's house in Barbados. Within a month, I received a letter from my brother saying that he had a strong desire to have the family together at Christmas and asking me to use the enclosed steamship ticket for Barbados. I sailed 2 days after I received my brother's letter and spent a wonderful winter in Barbados. This experience has convinced me that man can be anything he pleases if he will make the conception habitual and think from the end. It has also shown me that I can no longer excuse myself by placing the blame on the world of external things, that my good and my evil have no dependency except from myself, that it depends on the state from which I view the world, how things present themselves. Man who is free in his choice acts from conceptions which he freely, though not always wisely, chooses. All conceivable states are awaiting our choice and occupancy, but no amount of rationalizing will of itself yield us the state of consciousness, which is the only thing worth having. The imaginative image is the only thing to seek. The ultimate purpose of imagination is to create in us the spirit of Jesus, which is continual forgiveness of sin, continual identification of man with his ideal. Only by identifying ourselves with our aim can we forgive ourselves for having missed it. All else is labor in vain. On this path to whatever place or state we convey our imagination to that place or state, we will gravitate physically also. John 14:2 says, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, ye may be also. By sleeping in my Father's house, in my imagination, as though I slept there in the flesh, I fused my imagination with the state, and I was compelled to experience that state in the flesh also. So vivid was this state to me, I could have been seen in my father's house had any sensitive entered the room where in imagination I was sleeping. A man can be seen where in imagination he is, for a man must be where his imagination is, for his imagination is himself. This I know from experience, for I have been seen by a few to whom I desired to be seen, when physically I was hundreds of miles away. I, by the intensity of my imagination and feeling, imagining and feeling myself to be in Barbados instead of merely thinking of Barbados, had spanned the vast Atlantic to influence my brother into desiring my presence to complete the family circle at Christmas. Thinking from the end, from the feeling of my wish fulfilled, was the source of everything that happened as outer cause, such as my brother's impulse to send me a steamship ticket. And it was also the cause of everything that appeared as results. Determined imagination, thinking from the end, is the beginning of all miracles. I would like to give you an immense belief in miracles, but a miracle is only the name given by those who have no knowledge of the power and function of imagination to the works of imagination. Imagining oneself into the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the means by which a new state is entered. This gives us the state, the quality of isness. Hermes tells us that which is manifested. That which has been or shall be is unmanifested, but not dead. For soul, the eternal activity of God, animates all things. The future must become the present in the imagination of one who would wisely and consciously create circumstances. We must translate vision into being, thinking of into thinking from. Imagination must center itself in some state and view the world from that state. Thinking from the end is an intense perception of the world of fulfilled desire. Thinking from the state desired is creative living. Ignorance of this ability to think from the end is bondage. It is the root of all bondage with which man is bound. To passively surrender to the evidence of the senses underestimates the capacities of the inner self. Once man accepts thinking from the end as a creative principle in which he can cooperate, then he is redeemed from the absurdity of ever attempting to achieve his objective by merely thinking of it. Desire is the mainspring of the mental machinery. It is a blessed thing. It is right and natural craving, which has a state of consciousness as its right and natural satisfaction. It is necessary to have an aim in life. Without an aim, we drift. What Wantest thou of me is the implied question asked most often by the central figure of the Gospels. In defining your aim, you must want it. It is lack of this passionate direction to life that makes mankind fail of accomplishment. The spanning of the bridge between desire, thinking of, and satisfaction, thinking from, is all important. We must move mentally from thinking of the end to thinking from the end. This reason could never do. By its nature, it is restricted to the evidence of the senses. You cannot reason your way to what you want. If you have a dream, a deep desire, something that you really want to create, it might not be logical. And if you use your reasoning ability, you will never attain something so big and beautiful as an audacious goal that you truly desire. Through reasoning, through the evidence of your senses, it cannot come to pass. But starting with your imagination, having no such limitation, can. Desire exists to be gratified in the activity of imagination. Through imagination, man escapes from the limitation of the senses and the bondage of reason. There is no stopping the man who can think from the end. Nothing can stop him. He creates the means and grows his way out of limitation into ever greater and greater mansions of the Lord. It does not matter what he has been or what he is. All that matters is, what does he want? He knows that the world is a manifestation of the mental activity which goes on within himself. So he strives to determine and control the ends from which he thinks. In his imagination, he dwells in the end, confident that he shall dwell there in the flesh also. He puts his whole trust in the feeling of the wish fulfilled and lives by committing himself to that state. For the art of fortune is to tempt him so to do. Like the man at the pool of Bethesda, he is ready for the moving of the waters of imagination. Knowing that every desire is ripe grain to him who knows how to think from the end, he is indifferent to mere reasonable probability and confident that through continuous imagination, his assumptions will harden into fact. But how to persuade men everywhere that thinking from the end is the only living, how to foster it in every activity of man, how to reveal it as the plenitude of life and not the compensation of the disappointed. That is the problem. Life is a controllable thing. You can experience what you please once you realize that you are his son and that you are by what you are by virtue of the state of consciousness from which you think and view the world. Luke 15:31 says, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. All that you desire is yours. It can be yours. It starts with thinking from the end, using the beautiful imagination that you have been gifted with to decide What desires do you have? What would you have be your reality? You have a deep desire to do or be or have something. It starts in your imagination. Everything starts in the imagination. What was once fantasy is now reality. That means what you have as a fantasy in your imagination will become reality, but you must fuse with the state of being that. You must spend time in your imagination, developing the picture, designing the goal, deciding what you want. And then through faith, through knowledge, gaining knowledge, through studying, understanding that everything you desire is yours, but you must match that state of being. You must become what you desire. Start out imagining what a beautiful life it is that you truly desire. What do you want to be, do, or have? And then take the time to design it in your imagination, going for what you really want. Get centered, get calm, get into a state of being at ease, and then in that creative state, write out your heart's desire. Draw pictures of it, sketch it out, make a vision board, write a story about it. Script your life the way you desire it to be. And as you think from the end, as you write about it as if it's already done, as you create affirmations that match that state of being, and spend time in your imagination, just like Abdullah suggested to Neville. Think from the state of being in your father's home in Barbados at Christmas time. Whatever it is your heart desires, the universe will conspire to make it happen. Things will take place that need to take place in order to clear a path for you to be experiencing that in reality. But it starts in focused imagination. Create a wonderful day. Thank you for joining me in this morning mindfulness practice. Design your future and live from that end, and it will appear just as you created it in your mind. Thank you for joining me today. I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 7. Thank you.